In the elegant Eco-Crown restaurant, everyone trembled before Chief Funmilayo Adebayo, the most feared matriarch in high society. But a young waitress was about to do something that would change everything forever. A heavy silence fell over the main hall of the Eco-Crown as soon as she crossed the glass doors. Chief Funmilayo Adebayo, in her late 60s, walked with the authority of someone who had built a financial empire from scratch. Her piercing gaze swept across the luxurious environment, as if inspecting every detail, every flaw, every imperfection that could tarnish her reputation. The waiters automatically lowered their heads, and other customers suspended their conversations. Even the pianist lowered the volume of the classical music that echoed softly through the ornate corners of the establishment. Chief Funmilayo Adebayo was not just a customer. She was a force of nature that shaped everything around her through power and intimidation. Table 16. As always, murmured Mr. Emeka, his hands trembling slightly as he arranged the menus. He had worked at the Eco-Crown for over a decade and still felt like a nervous schoolboy in the presence of the Adebayo matriarch. And make sure everything is perfect. We cannot afford to make any mistakes. Funmilayo headed to her reserved table, strategically located in the center of the hall, where she could observe everything and everyone. Her impeccable black dress and discreet, yet expensive, jewelry sent a clear message. Here was someone accustomed to having the world bow before her. On the other side of the restaurant, a young waitress observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Chioma Okoro had started working at the Eco-Crown a few weeks ago and was still learning the unwritten rules of the establishment. Just over 20 years old, she possessed a quiet determination that contrasted with the tense atmosphere that dominated the place whenever certain people appeared. Chioma, called Mrs. Adewale, the veteran supervisor, approaching with quick steps. "You will serve table 16 today." Chioma's eyes widened. "Chief Adebayo's table? But I thought Lola is sick and Mary had a family emergency," Mrs. Adewale interrupted, her voice filled with concern. "You are the only one available, but listen carefully. Be polite, be quick, and above all, do not question anything, absolutely anything." Chioma nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She had heard the stories about Funmilayo Adebayo, how she had destroyed entire businesses with a single phone call, how she made employees cry with her cutting words, how her influence extended far beyond the business world. Taking a deep breath, Chioma walked towards table 16, carrying a tray with iced water and the special menu reserved only for VIP clients. Her steps were firm, despite the nervousness she felt growing in her chest. "Good afternoon, Ma," Chioma said with a genuine smile, gently placing the glass of water on the table. "It is a pleasure to serve you today. My name is Chioma, and I will be taking care of everything you need." Funmilayo slowly raised her eyes, her cold gaze sweeping over Chioma from head to toe, as if evaluating every aspect of the young woman. The silence stretched for long seconds, creating a palpable tension in the air. "You are new," Funmilayo stated, her sharp voice echoing with an authority that brooked no contradiction. "How many days have you been working at this establishment?" "A few weeks, Ma," replied Chioma, maintaining her professional posture despite the intimidating tone. "A few weeks," Funmilayo repeated, a cold smile appearing on her lips. "And they already think you are prepared to serve me? Interesting." Chioma felt the eyes of all the other staff on her. She could see Mrs. Adewale watching nervously from a distance, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. The weight of the situation was immense, but something inside her, a strength she herself did not fully understand, kept her steady. "Chief Adebayo," Chioma said with respectful courtesy, "I can assure you that I will do everything in my power to make your experience today exceptional. What would you like to order?" Funmilayo studied the young waitress's face for a few more moments. There was something different about this girl. She did not show the paralyzing fear that all the other employees displayed. This was intriguing and slightly irritating. "I want the grilled croaker fish, but it must be perfectly cooked, not too dry, not raw. The seafood okra as a side, and make sure it is not as salty as it was the last time I was here. And bring me a glass of the special reserve red wine, the one that costs 80,000 a bottle." Chioma carefully noted every detail, not flinching at the specific requests or the exorbitant price of the wine. "Perfectly understood, Ma. How long would you estimate for the preparation?" 30 minutes. "Not a second more," declared Funmilayo, her voice carrying an implicit threat. "And young lady?" "Yes, Ma. I hope you understand that a mistake is not an option when it comes to serving me. Many careers have been destroyed for much less than a poorly prepared dish or inadequate service. Chioma maintained her professional smile, but her eyes revealed a spark of something Funmilayo could not immediately identify. It was not submission, not fear. It was something deeper, more challenging. "I understand perfectly, Ma," replied Chioma, "and I can guarantee that you will be completely satisfied." As Chioma headed to the kitchen, Funmilayo watched her with growing interest. There was something familiar about that young woman, something that stirred a distant memory in her mind. But what it was exactly, she could not yet determine. In the kitchen, Chioma relayed the order to Chef Tunde with military precision. "She said we have exactly 30 minutes, she explained. "And apparently our reputation depends on it." Tunde nodded gravely. He knew Funmilayo Adebayo's reputation well and knew that any mistake could have severe consequences, not just for Chioma, but for the entire restaurant. "Don't worry," he said, already starting to prepare the ingredients. "We will make this the best meal she has ever had here." While waiting for the dish to be prepared, Chioma could not shake the strange feeling she had experienced when looking directly into Funmilayo Adebayo's eyes. There was something there, a hidden pain, a vulnerability that the matriarch fought fiercely to hide under her mask of coldness and power. And for reasons she herself did not understand, Chioma knew this would not be just another ordinary work night at the Eco Crown. The 30 minutes passed like an eternity. Chioma watched the kitchen clock as Tunde put the finishing touches on Funmilayo Adebayo's plate. Every second that passed increased the tension in the air, and she could feel the nervous glances of the other staff on her. "It is ready," Tunde announced, delicately placing the grilled croaker next to the fragrant okra. "This is the best dish I have ever prepared for her. If this does not impress her, nothing will." Chioma picked up the tray with steady hands, despite the nervousness growing in her chest. She walked through the main hall, passing other tables where customers whispered among themselves, all discreetly watching the drama unfolding before their eyes. "Ma," Chioma said, approaching the table with elegance, "your dinner is served." Funmilayo looked up from her phone where she was typing furiously, probably closing some multi-million naira deal or destroying the career of some unfortunate person who had crossed her path. Her gaze went over the plate with the precision of an expert, analyzing every detail, every color, every aroma emanating from the meal. "Interesting," she murmured, cutting a small piece of the fish and tasting it slowly. Her eyes closed for a brief moment, and Chioma held her breath, waiting for the verdict that could determine her future at the Eco Crown. "It is acceptable," Funmilayo finally declared, and Chioma felt immense relief wash over her, but the matriarch was not finished. "Sit down." "I'm sorry, Ma?" Chioma asked, confused. "I said, sit down, here, in front of me." Funmilayo's tone did not allow for questions. "I want to talk to you." Chioma looked around, noticing that everyone in the restaurant had stopped what they were doing to watch the unusual scene. Mrs. Adewale was making desperate gestures from afar, clearly worried about what might happen, but Chioma, for some reason she could not explain, obeyed and sat down before the most powerful woman she had ever met. "What is your full name?" Funmilayo asked, continuing to eat while keeping her penetrating gaze fixed on the young woman. "Chioma Okoro." "Ma Okoro." Funmilayo repeated the surname slowly, as if searching for something in her memory. "That name is familiar to me. Very familiar, in fact." Chioma felt a shiver run down her spine. "Perhaps you know my family from somewhere." Funmilayo's eyes narrowed. "Tell me about your family, Chioma Okoro. Where did you grow up? Who are your parents?" The young woman hesitated for a moment. There was something in the way Funmilayo asked these questions that made her extremely uncomfortable. "I grew up in Surulere, Ma. My mother's name is Ngozi Okoro, and my father, well, he passed away when I was a child." Funmilayo's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her expression changed completely. The calculated coldness gave way to something much more disturbing. Shock, recognition, and then a rage that seemed to burn from within. "Ngozi Okoro," she whispered, her voice filled with an emotion Chioma could not identify. "Ngozi Okoro, who worked as a housemaid." Chioma's heart began to beat faster. "Yes, Ma. My mother worked her whole life as a housemaid to support our family." "But how do you know my mother?" "Your mother," Funmilayo interrupted, her voice now as cold as ice, "destroyed my life." The silence that followed was deafening. Chioma felt as if the world had stopped spinning. Funmilayo's words echoed in her mind, but she could not understand what they meant. "I don't understand, Ma," said Chioma, her voice trembling slightly. "My mother is an honest, hard-working woman. She would never harm anyone." Funmilayo let out a bitter laugh that made Chioma shiver. "Honest? Your honest mother destroyed my marriage, girl." She stole the man I loved more than life itself. Tears began to form in Chioma's eyes. That cannot be true. My mother told me my father died in an accident. Your father, Funmilayo spat the words as if they were poison, was my husband, Dele Adebayo, the love of my life, the father of my only son, the man who swore to love me forever until your mother came into our lives. Chioma's world collapsed in that moment. Everything around her seemed to spin. The voices of the other customers turned into a distant buzz, and she felt as if she could not breathe. The pieces of a puzzle she never knew existed began to fit together painfully. No, she whispered, shaking her head desperately. That cannot be true. My mother told me my father was a simple man, that they loved each other very much. They loved each other, Funmilayo confirmed cruelly. So much that he abandoned his legal wife and his 5-year-old son to run away with the housemaid. So much that he chose to live a life of poverty with her, instead of keeping his family together. Chioma felt the tears streaming freely down her face. Why are you telling me this? Why are you being so cruel? Cruel. Funmilayo leaned forward, her eyes shining with a frightening intensity. You want to know what cruel is, girl? It is finding out that the man you love more than life itself betrayed you with the housemaid. It is having to explain to your little boy why daddy left and never came back. It is living all these years with a hole in your chest, knowing your family was destroyed by a woman you trusted. The entire restaurant was in absolute silence now. Everyone present could feel the dramatic tension unfolding before their eyes. Mrs. Adewale had approached, but did not know how to intervene in such a personal and explosive situation. My mother is not a home wrecker, Chioma said, finding courage from somewhere deep within her. She is the most upright woman I know. If she got involved with my father, there must have been a reason. Reason? Funmilayo laughed bitterly. The reason was ambition, my dear. Your mother saw an opportunity to get ahead in life and she grabbed it, no matter how many people she hurt in the process. That is not true, Chioma exclaimed, her voice filled with emotion. My mother has always lived simply, never asked for anything from anyone. She worked day and night to give me an education and dignity. If she were ambitious, as you say, she would not have spent her whole life cleaning other people's houses. Chioma's response seemed to hit Funmilayo like a punch to the gut. For a moment, the matriarch's mask of coldness wavered, revealing a deep vulnerability she struggled to hide. You don't understand, Funmilayo murmured, her voice lower now. You cannot understand the pain of being betrayed by the person you trusted most. Ngozi had worked in our house for 3 years. I treated her like family, trusted her with my secrets, with my son, with my life, and she stole everything from me. And what happened to my father? Chioma asked, her tears continuing to fall. If he really was your husband, why did my mother tell me he died? Funmilayo's silence was more eloquent than any words. She looked at the young woman before her, seeing for the first time not the daughter of the woman who had destroyed her life, but an innocent girl who was discovering devastating truths about her own origins. He died. Funmilayo said finally, her voice almost a whisper. 2 years after leaving our family, a car accident on his way back from work. Your mother was left a widow and pregnant, forced to raise you alone. Chioma covered her face with her hands, trying to process all the information that was transforming everything she thought she knew about her life. Why did she never tell me the truth? Perhaps because she knew how much it would make her look like the villain in the story, Funmilayo replied, but there was less venom in her voice now, or perhaps because she truly loved him and wanted to protect his memory for you. The restaurant remained in sepulchral silence. Mr. Emeka had discreetly asked other staff to attend to the other tables, realizing that this conversation was something much bigger than a simple customer complaint. So you are, Chioma began, but her voice failed. His stepmother, the woman your father abandoned to be with your mother. Funmilayo finished the sentence Chioma could not complete. And you, my dear girl, are the half-sister of my son, Bayo. The shock of this revelation was like lightning on a clear day. Chioma felt as if everything around her was crumbling. She had a family she never knew existed, a half-brother, a completely different story from the one her mother had told her. Bayo Adebayo, she whispered, recognizing the name of one of the most successful businessmen in the city. He is my half-brother? Yes, Funmilayo confirmed. And he has no idea that you exist. Chioma's tears fell silently onto the marble table as she tried to process the magnitude of the revelations she had just received. The Eco Crown restaurant, which minutes before was just her workplace, had transformed into the stage for a devastating truth that completely rewrote her life story. Funmilayo watched the young woman with a complex expression, where old anger mingled with something she could not quite identify. Perhaps it was pity, perhaps it was recognition, Or perhaps it was simply the weight of carrying so much hatred for so long. He never knew about you. Funmilayo said finally, her voice softer now. Dele died without knowing he was going to be a father again. Chioma lifted her tear-reddened eyes. My mother was pregnant when he died? Yes. Ngozi discovered the pregnancy 2 weeks after the funeral. Funmilayo stirred the wine that had grown cold, lost in painful memories. I found out why. Because she came to the burial. The shock was like a slap to Chioma's face. She went to my father's funeral. She was pregnant, desperate, with nowhere to go. Dele had left everything behind when he ran away with me. The money, the assets, the comfortable life. They lived simply, almost in poverty. Funmilayo paused, as if the next words were difficult to say. She asked me for help. The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Chioma could barely breathe, imagining her young, pregnant, and widowed mother begging for help from the woman whose husband she had stolen. "And you helped her?" Chioma asked. Her voice was almost a whisper. Funmilayo looked directly into the young woman's eyes. I threw her out. I told her she had chosen her life when she decided to destroy my family, and that now she would have to live with the consequences. The pain Chioma felt in that moment was physical. She imagined her mother, young and vulnerable, being rejected at the moment she most needed compassion. How could you be so cruel to someone who was suffering? Because I was suffering too, Funmilayo exclaimed, her composure finally cracking. My world had collapsed. My son cried every night, asking when his father would come home. I had lost the love of my life, and discovered that everything I believed in was a lie. The tears Funmilayo had held back for decades began to escape, transforming the fearsome woman into someone deeply human and hurt. The other customers in the restaurant watched the scene with fascination and discomfort, witnessing a rare moment of vulnerability from one of the most powerful people in the city. But she was pregnant, Chioma whispered. Her own tears renewed. It was an innocent child she was carrying. It was me. I know, Funmilayo admitted, her voice breaking. And that was the cruelest choice I have ever made in my entire life. For years, she haunted me. I wondered if you had been born healthy, if Ngozi managed to raise you alone, if you were okay. Chioma looked at the woman before her, with a mixture of anger, sadness, and a strange form of understanding. My mother worked 3 jobs to support me when I was little. She cleaned houses in the morning, cooked in a restaurant in the afternoon, and cleaned offices at night. She slept only 4 hours a day to make sure I had food on the table and could study. Every word from Chioma was like a stab to Funmilayo's heart. The image of the young Ngozi, struggling alone to raise her daughter, contrasted painfully with her own life of luxury and financial comfort. She never complained, Chioma continued, her voice filled with emotion. She never told me that life was hard. She always smiled when she came home, even when I could see she was exhausted. And when I asked about my father, she would just say that he had been a good man, that he loved me very much, but that God had taken him too soon. She spoke well of Dele to you? Funmilayo asked, surprised. Always. She said I had his eyes and his determination, that he would be proud of the woman I had become. Chioma paused, looking directly at Funmilayo. She never said a negative word about him, even knowing he had abandoned his family. The impact of these words on Funmilayo was devastating. She had spent decades fueling her anger against Ngozi, building an image of the woman as a calculating homewrecker. But the reality Chioma presented was completely different. That of a mother who had protected the father's memory for her daughter, even at the cost of her own reputation. For all these years, Funmilayo murmured, I thought Ngozi had seduced Dele out of ambition, that she wanted a better life and did not care about destroying our family to get it. My mother was never ambitious, Chioma replied firmly. If she were, she would have looked for a rich, single man, not one who was married with a child. If she truly loved my father, it must have been very difficult to live knowing he had left a family behind. Funmilayo felt as if she were seeing her life from a new perspective for the first time in decades. The narrative of villainy she had built around Ngozi was beginning to crumble in the face of the facts presented by Chioma. Bayo, Funmilayo said suddenly, as if an important realization had struck her. My son is coming here soon. Chioma felt her heart race. Here? Today? He has dinner with me every Friday. It is a tradition we have kept since he was a teenager. Funmilayo looked at the clock. He should be here any moment. Panic seized Chioma. The idea of meeting her half-brother under these circumstances, with emotions running high and so many painful truths newly revealed, was too frightening. I need to go, Chioma said, quickly getting up from her chair. I cannot be here when he arrives. Not like this. Wait, Funmilayo said, gently holding Chioma's wrist. Please. It was a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. It was the first time Funmilayo had shown any kind of genuine affection or concern for the young woman. Chioma stopped, looking at the hand that held hers. The same hand that had signed multi-million naira contracts, that had built an empire, that had rejected her mother when she needed help the most. He deserves to know, Funmilayo said softly. Bayo deserves to know he has a sister. Half-sister, Chioma corrected, but her voice no longer had its previous harshness. Sister, Funmilayo repeated firmly. The blood is the same, the loss is the same, the pain of growing up without a father is the same. Chioma hesitated. She had spent her entire life feeling alone in the world, with only her mother as family. The possibility of discovering she had a brother was both exciting and terrifying. What if he rejects me? Chioma asked, her vulnerability showing in her voice. What if he thinks like you used to think about my mother? Funmilayo looked deeply into Chioma's eyes and saw there the same determination she had admired in the young Dele, the same quiet strength Ngozi had shown in raising a daughter alone. Bayo is a good man, she said finally. He is fair and compassionate, very different from how I became after losing your father. At that moment, the restaurant doors opened, and an elegant man in his early 30s entered the eco-crown, tall, dark-haired, with kind eyes and a warm smile that lit up the room as soon as he saw Funmilayo. Mummy, he said, walking towards the table, but stopped abruptly when he saw Chioma sitting with his mother, both with red, tear-stained eyes. Bayo, Funmilayo said, her voice trembling slightly, I need to introduce you to someone very important. Bayo Montenegro stopped mid-stride, his eyes scanning the scene before him with growing curiosity. Something deeply emotional was happening between his mother and this young waitress, something that went far beyond a simple customer complaint or service issue. Mummy, is everything all right? He asked, approaching the table slowly. His kind eyes immediately caught the tears on both women's faces. Did something happen? Funmilayo took a deep breath, knowing that the next words would change her son's life forever. She looked at Chioma, who had stood up and was clearly fighting the urge to flee the situation. Bayo, Funmilayo began, her voice heavy with emotion. I want you to meet Chioma Okoro. Bayo extended his hand politely, but there was confusion in his eyes. It's a pleasure to meet you, Chioma. I'm sorry, but we were talking about your father. Funmilayo interrupted, and the words fell like a bomb in the already tense atmosphere. Bayo's smile vanished immediately. He rarely spoke about Dele Adebayo, the father who had left when he was just a child, leaving emotional scars that had never truly healed. My father? I don't understand why you would be talking about him. Chioma felt her legs tremble. Seeing Bayo there, so close, knowing they shared the same father, was surreal and overwhelming. She could see family resemblances in his face, the strong jawline, the shape of his eyes, even the way he tilted his head slightly when he was confused. Sit down, my son, Funmilayo said gently. This will be hard to hear, but you need to know the truth. Bayo sat down slowly, his eyes alternating between his mother and Chioma, trying to decipher the mystery unfolding before him. What truth? Mummy, you're scaring me. Chioma, Funmilayo said, looking directly at the young woman, is your sister. The silence that followed was absolute. Bayo blinked several times, as if trying to process words that made no sense in his mind. My what? Your half-sister, Funmilayo corrected softly. Your father's daughter with Ngozi Okoro. Bayo stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. That's impossible. My father died years ago. I was a child when he left us. He left us to be with Chioma's mother, Funmilayo explained, each word coming out with difficulty. Ngozi was pregnant when Dele died. Chioma is his daughter. Tears began to form in Bayo's eyes. His whole life, he had struggled with his father's abandonment, wondering why he had not been enough to make his father stay. To discover that Dele had started a new family was like reopening an old wound that had never properly healed. He had another family? Bayo asked, his voice broken. And he never told me, never came back to tell me I had a sister. He died before Chioma was born. Funmilayo said gently, he never knew he was going to have another child. Bayo looked at Chioma with a mixture of shock, curiosity, and a deep pain that she recognized immediately. It was the same pain she herself had carried her whole life, the pain of growing up without a father, of wondering how things would have been different if he had stayed in their lives. Did you know? He asked Chioma, his voice barely a whisper. Did you know I existed? Chioma shook her head, tears streaming freely. I found out today. My mother never told me the truth about my father. She said he was a simple man, that he had died in an accident. Not that he was married and had another child. Ngozi protected you from the truth, Funmilayo added. She raised you alone, without ever asking for our help. Bayo sat down again, running his hands over his face. All these years, I thought I was his only child, that maybe if I were better, more interesting, more something, he would have stayed with us. You were never the problem, Chioma said softly, finding the courage to speak. I grew up thinking the same thing, that maybe if my mother were different, more special, our father wouldn't have died and left us alone. The connection between the two siblings was instantaneous and powerful. They had carried similar burdens of pain and self-doubt, both blaming themselves for the paternal absence that had marked their childhoods. "What is your mother like?" Bayo asked, his genuine curiosity momentarily overcoming the shock. "Ngozi, right? What is she like?" Chioma's face lit up with love and pride. "She's the strongest person I know. She worked 3 jobs to raise me, never complained, never let me feel that we were poor or that anything was missing. She always told me I was blessed and loved. She sounds incredible," Bayo said sincerely. I would like to meet her someday, if she'll allow it." "You would?" Chioma asked, surprised. Even knowing that she and our father, they loved each other. Bayo said with a maturity that impressed Funmilayo. Maybe not in the ideal way, maybe not the right way, but they loved each other. "And she raised you alone, with love and dedication. How could I judge her for that?" Funmilayo watched the interaction between the two young people with a mixture of admiration and remorse. Seeing her son's generosity and compassion contrasted painfully with her own cruel reaction years earlier. "Bayo," she said softly, "there's something else you both need to know." Both siblings looked at her, already braced for more revelations. "When Ngozi came to me for help, pregnant and desperate, I rejected her. I said cruel things, threw her out of our house. I made it clear she would receive nothing from our family." The shock on Bayo's face was evident. "Mummy, you didn't." "I did," Funmilayo admitted, her voice heavy with shame. "I was hurt, betrayed, furious. I wanted her to suffer as I was suffering. I didn't think about the innocent child she was carrying. I didn't think that you might want to know your sister someday." "Mummy," Bayo said, his voice firm but gentle. "That was wrong. I know," she replied, "and I have carried this guilt all these years." Seeing Chioma now, knowing the strong and dignified woman she has become, despite my cruelty, I realize how wrong I was. Chioma looked at Funmilayo with a complex expression. The anger she had initially felt was being tempered by something more complex, an understanding of the pain that had motivated the matriarch's actions. "You were suffering too," Chioma said finally. "It doesn't justify what you did, but I understand why. Your generosity humbles me," Funmilayo replied. "You have every right to hate me. Hate only hurts the one who carries it," Chioma said, echoing words her mother had taught her. "My mother always told me that forgiving isn't about forgetting what happened, but about freeing our hearts from the weight of bitterness." Bayo looked at his sister with growing admiration. Ngozi truly raised an extraordinary daughter. "And you," Chioma said, looking at Bayo, "you grew up to be the compassionate man our father would be proud to call his son." The tears in Bayo's eyes renewed. "All these years I felt incomplete, like a part of me was missing. Now I understand why. I also always felt there was something more," Chioma admitted, "as if there were important people I was supposed to know. But I didn't know who or where they were." Funmilayo watched the two young people finding connection and healing amidst the painful revelations. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to imagine how different things might have been if she had made different choices years ago. "Chioma," Bayo said suddenly, "you've been working here at the Echo Crown for a few weeks." She confirmed. "I need the job to help support my mother and pay for my studies." "What kind of studies?" he asked, genuinely interested. "I'm finishing my degree in business administration at night. I've always dreamed of having my own business someday." Bayo's eyes lit up. "Business administration. That's exactly the kind of knowledge our company needs. Someone with real-world experience who understands the value of hard work." "Our company?" Chioma asked, confused. Bayo looked at his mother, who nodded with a small but genuine smile. "Chioma," Funmilayo said, "it's time for you to meet your entire family and all the inheritance your father left behind." Funmilayo's words echoed through the restaurant like a silent thunderclap. Chioma felt her world spin again, barely able to process the magnitude of what was being revealed. Inheritance? What inheritance could her father have left when she had grown up in poverty? "I don't understand," Chioma said, her voice trembling. "My mother and I have always lived with very little. If my father had assets, why did we never receive anything? Bayo looked at his mother with an expression of growing understanding and discomfort. Mummy, tell me you didn't. When Dele died, Funmilayo began, her words heavy with decades of guilt. He hadn't updated his will. Legally, I was still his wife, even though we were separated. All the assets came to our family. The shock on Chioma's face was palpable. You mean my mother was entitled to something? Ngozi had rights. Funmilayo confirmed with difficulty. And you, as Dele's daughter, would also have been entitled to a considerable part of the inheritance. How much? Bayo asked, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. At the time, Dele's assets were worth approximately 500 million. Between the house where you lived, the financial investments, the business he had started, Funmilayo paused, seeing the impact of her words on Chioma's face. By law, Chioma would have been entitled to 1/3 of everything. Chioma felt her legs give way. She held onto the table to keep from falling, trying to process that she had grown up in deprivation, while millions of naira that legally belonged to her were in the hands of the Adebayo family. Almost 170 million, she whispered, calculating mentally. My mother worked until her health was destroyed, while 170 million that belonged to us was where? Invested, multiplied, transformed into the empire our family owns today. Bayo answered, his voice filled with remorse. Chioma, I swear I didn't know. If I had known you existed, that you and your mother were in need, how could you not know? Chioma asked, her emotion finally turning into a righteous anger. My mother wasn't invisible. She worked in the homes of high society for years. Someone must have known she had become pregnant by Dele Adebayo. Funmilayo lowered her eyes, unable to face the young woman's accusing gaze. People knew, but I made sure everyone understood that Ngozi Okoro was not welcome in our circles, that anyone who employed her or helped her would be positioning themselves against our family. The silence that followed was deafening. Bayo looked at his mother as if seeing her for the first time, realizing the extent of the systematic cruelty she had employed to punish an innocent woman and her daughter. You destroyed her work opportunities, he said, his voice incredulous. You used our influence to ensure she and Chioma remained in poverty. I was hurt. Funmilayo exploded, her defenses finally crumbling. My world had ended. My husband had left me for our housemaid. I wanted her to pay for what she had done. She wasn't your enemy, Chioma shouted, her emotions finally overflowing. She was a woman who fell in love, and even if you couldn't forgive her, I was an innocent child. I didn't choose to be born. I didn't choose who my parents were. Tears streamed freely down Chioma's face, carrying decades of struggle, deprivation, and deferred dreams. Do you know how many nights my mother cried in secret because she couldn't give me the things other children had? How many times she went without food to make sure I ate? How many medicines she didn't buy for herself to pay for my school books? Each of Chioma's words hit Funmilayo like a physical slap. The image of the young, desperate Ngozi she had thrown out transformed into the brutal reality of a mother sacrificing everything for her daughter. Chioma, Bayo said gently, approaching his sister, I want to fix this. I want to make sure you receive what has always been rightfully yours. It's not about the money, Chioma replied, though her tears partially contradicted her words. It's about justice. It's about the fact that my mother could have had a decent life, proper medical care, opportunities that were denied to her out of pure cruelty. Funmilayo stood up slowly, her regal composure finally crumbling completely. Ngozi, how is Ngozi now? The question caught Chioma by surprise. She's not well. She developed health problems because of years of overwork. Her knees are destroyed from spending so much time kneeling to clean floors. Her hands have chronic arthritis and we don't have money for proper treatment. The impact of these words on Funmilayo was devastating. She could clearly see the direct line between her cruel actions and Ngozi's physical suffering decades later. Where is she now? Bayo asked softly. At home, resting. She can't work like she used to anymore. Chioma wiped the tears from her face. I work here at night and do freelance accounting during the day to pay for her medical appointments. Chioma, Funmilayo said, her voice broken. Let me fix what I did. Let me take care of Ngozi's medical treatments. Let me give back what has always belonged to you. Why? Chioma asked suspiciously, after decades of ignoring our existence. Why now? Funmilayo looked at the young woman, seeing in her Ngozi's strength, Dele's determination, and a dignity she herself had lost somewhere along the years of bitterness. Because seeing you today, talking to you, I realize I wasted decades hating when I could have chosen to love. Because your mother raised an extraordinary daughter, despite all the hardship I created for you. Because, Funmilayo paused, struggling to find the words, because I want to know the granddaughter Ngozi gave me. Granddaughter? Chioma asked, confused. You are Dele's daughter. Funmilayo explained gently. Dele was my husband. That makes you my stepdaughter. And if Ngozi will allow me, I would like to try to be the family you always deserve to have. Bayo watched his mother's transformation with admiration and surprise. The cold, calculating woman who had dominated his life was being replaced by someone vulnerable, repentant, and genuinely interested in repairing the damage of the past. Chioma, he said, I know this is a lot to process, but you don't have to make any decisions right now. But I want you to know that as your family, we want to take care of you and Ngozi, not as charity, but as your right. My mother is a proud woman, Chioma said thoughtfully. She has never accepted help from anyone. How will I explain where the money for the medical treatments is coming from? Tell her the truth. Funmilayo suggested, that you found your father's family, and that we are correcting an old injustice. And what if she doesn't want to see me? Funmilayo asked, her vulnerability showing. If she can't forgive me for what I did. Chioma looked at the woman who had been the source of so much suffering in her life, but who now seemed genuinely sorry and willing to make amends. My mother taught me that forgiveness frees the forgiver more than the forgiven, she said finally, but forgiveness must be accompanied by actions that demonstrate genuine change. What kind of actions? Bayo asked. First, we want all of my mother's medical treatments to be paid for at the best hospitals available. Second, we want the share of the inheritance that always belonged to us, with interest and adjustments. Third, Chioma paused, looking directly at Funmilayo. I want you to apologize to my mother in person, not by phone, not through third parties, face to face. Funmilayo nodded without hesitation. I accept all conditions. And there's one more thing, Chioma added, her voice growing stronger. I don't just want to receive money and disappear. If you really want to be our family, then I want to participate in the family business. I want to learn, contribute, be part of something bigger. Bayo smiled for the first time since he had arrived at the restaurant. Our company can always use someone with your determination and unique perspective. But first, Chioma said, looking around the restaurant where she had discovered her true identity, I need to finish my shift. I have responsibilities here, and I don't abandon my commitments. The admiration in both Funmilayo's and Bayo's eyes was evident. Even in the face of the promise of wealth and a new life, Chioma maintained her principles and sense of responsibility. Then, Funmilayo said, how about Bayo and I wait for you to finish your shift, and then we'll accompany you home to talk to Ngozi. Chioma hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but be prepared. My mother is not going to make things easy for you. The next few hours at the Echo Crown passed in an emotional blur for Chioma. She tried to focus on her tasks, serving other tables, clearing dishes, smiling at customers, but her thoughts were completely on the impending meeting between the two women who had most influenced her life, even without her knowing. Funmilayo and Bayo remained in the restaurant, talking in low voices as they waited. Chioma could see them from time to time, noticing how Bayo gestured excitedly, probably asking 1,000 questions about the sister he had just discovered. Funmilayo, for her part, seemed to be undergoing an internal transformation, her regal posture gradually giving way to something more human and vulnerable. Chioma, Mrs. Adewale approached during a break. Are you all right? You seem different since you served that table. I'm fine, Ma. I just found out some things about my family that changed everything. Chioma smiled sadly. After today, maybe my life will be completely different. Different how? Mrs. Adewale asked, concerned. For the better, I hope, Chioma replied, looking towards the table where her newly discovered family awaited her. Much better. When closing time finally arrived, Chioma walked to table 16 with hesitant steps. Funmilayo and Bayo stood up immediately, both visibly nervous about what was to come. Are you ready? Bayo asked gently. I don't know if anyone can be ready for this, Chioma admitted, but let's go. The journey to the simple house in Surulere was made in silence. Funmilayo looked out the window of the luxurious car, observing a world she had deliberately ignored for decades. The small houses, the streets without proper asphalt, the children playing in tiny yards, all contrasted sharply with the privileged world she lived in. This is it, Chioma said when they arrived in front of a modest but impeccably maintained house. The small garden in front was full of flowers that Ngozi cultivated with care, and the paint, though simple, was well kept. She keeps everything very beautiful, Bayo commented with admiration. My mother always said that poverty is not synonymous with neglect, Chioma replied with pride. She may not have money for luxuries, but she never lost her dignity. As they walked to the door, Funmilayo felt her heart pound, as it had, not in decades. She was about to face the woman she had hated for so long, the woman she had cruelly punished, the woman who had raised an extraordinary daughter despite all adversity. Chioma opened the door with her key, calling out softly, "Mama, I'm home, and I've brought some people for you to meet." Ngozi appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a cloth. She was a middle-aged woman, her graying hair tied in a simple bun, her eyes kind but marked by life's hardships. When she saw the elegantly dressed visitors next to her daughter, her expression changed to confusion and then to something close to shock. "Chioma, my dear," Ngozi began, but her words died when her eyes met Funmilayo's. The silence that followed was charged with decades of pain, regret, and mutual recognition. Ngozi held onto the doorframe, her face visibly paling. "Funmilayo, Adebayo," she whispered as if speaking the name of a ghost. "Ngozi." "Funmilayo," replied, her voice choked. You've hardly changed. What are you doing here?" Ngozi asked, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. "After all these years, what do you want with us?" Chioma stepped between the two women, feeling the electric tension in the air. "Mama, you need to sit down. We have a lot to talk about. I don't want to talk to her," Ngozi said firmly. "Not after what she did to me, what she did to us. Please." Bayo stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "My name is Bayo Adebayo. I am Dele's son." Ngozi looked at the young man, and Chioma could see recognition shining in her eyes. "Bayo, Dele's little boy. My God, how you've grown. Madam Ngozi." Bayo continued respectfully. "I know our family has caused a lot of suffering for you and for Chioma. We are here to try to right the wrongs of the past." Ngozi laughed bitterly. "Right the wrongs? You think that after decades of struggle, of working until my body was broken, of watching my daughter grow up with nothing that was rightfully hers, you can just show up here and fix everything?" "Mama," Chioma said softly, "they know about the inheritance. They know we were entitled to Papa's money." Ngozi turned to her daughter, shock and horror in her expression. "You told them about Dele?" "They told me about Dele," Chioma corrected. "I found out that Funmilayo is my stepmother and Bayo is my half-brother." Ngozi's legs gave out, and she sat heavily in the nearest chair. How did you find out?" "The last name." Funmilayo said softly, "Okoro." "I never forgot your name, Ngozi. I never forgot anything about you, and I never forgot your cruelty," Ngozi retorted, her words laden with decades of pent-up pain. "I never forgot how you threw me out when I was desperate, pregnant, and grieving." Funmilayo closed her eyes, Ngozi's words hitting her like physical slaps. "I know, and I came here to apologize." "Apologis?" Ngozi stood up abruptly, her voice rising. "You think apologies will erase what we went through? Do you know how many nights my daughter slept hungry because I had no money for food? How many times she came home from school crying because the other children made fun of her old clothes?" Each word from Ngozi was like a stab to Funmilayo's heart. Chioma felt tears streaming down her face, seeing her mother finally express the pain she had carried in silence for so long. "Do you know?" Ngozi continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "How many times I wanted to tell Chioma the truth about her father. How many times I wanted to explain that he wasn't just an ordinary worker who died in an accident, but a man who had left a rich family to be with us." "Why did you never tell her?" Bayo asked genuinely. Ngozi looked at him, seeing the young Dele in his features. "Because I knew if I told her the truth, Chioma would look for you, and I knew what your mother was capable of doing to protect her empire. I was afraid she would hurt my daughter like she had hurt me." "Mama," Chioma said, approaching and gently touching Ngozi's arm. "She wants to repair the damage. They want to give us what was always ours." "Why?" Ngozi asked directly to Funmilayo. "After decades of systematically destroying me, why now?" Funmilayo took a deep breath, knowing her answer had to be completely honest. "Because meeting Chioma showed me what I lost with my bitterness. Because seeing the extraordinary woman you raised alone made me realize you were not the villain I had built up in my mind. Because..." She paused, fighting against decades of pride. "Because you raised the daughter Dele would be proud to know, and that makes me realize you truly loved him." Ngozi was silent for a long moment, processing Funmilayo's words. "I loved him more than my own life," she said finally. "And when he died, I felt as if half of me had gone with him." "Me too," Funmilayo admitted, her own tears beginning to fall. "He was the love of my life, and when I lost him, I also lost my ability to forgive, my compassion, my humanity." "But you both lost the same man," Chioma observed softly. "You both suffered when he died. Why couldn't you comfort each other instead of destroying each other?" "Because hatred was easier than pain." Ngozi replied with a wisdom that surprised everyone. It's easier to blame someone than to accept that sometimes life is just cruel and meaningless. Ngozi, Funmilayo said, taking a step towards the other woman. I know my apologies are inadequate. I know that nothing I do can undo the suffering I caused, but I want to try. I want to take care of your medical treatments, return Chioma's inheritance, give you the life you always deserved to have. And what do you get out of it? Ngozi asked suspiciously. The chance to know my stepdaughter. Funmilayo answered simply and honestly. The opportunity to be the family you deserved, and maybe, just maybe, the possibility of finally making peace with Dele's memory. Ngozi looked at Chioma, then at Bayo, and finally back at Funmilayo. Dele talked about you, she said finally. In the last days before the accident, he was sorry for how things ended. He said he missed his son, that he wanted to find a way to unite our families. The impact of these words on Funmilayo and Bayo was visible. He said that? Bayo asked emotionally. He said he had 2 children he loved, even if one of them hadn't been born yet, and that he dreamed of the day you could meet. Ngozi looked directly at Funmilayo. Maybe it's time we fulfill the dream he couldn't. Ngozi's words about Dele's last wishes completely transformed the atmosphere in the small living room. The silence that followed was no longer filled with hostility, but with a shared sorrow, and perhaps the first spark of hope in decades. Funmilayo sat down slowly on the simple sofa, her hands trembling slightly. He really said he wanted to unite our families? Every night, Ngozi confirmed, her voice softer now. He suffered so much for leaving Bayo. He said the boy must be angry with him, that perhaps he would never forgive him. Bayo felt tears stream down his face. I was never angry with him. I just wanted him to come home. He knew that, Ngozi said gently, and he tortured himself over it every day. Dele told me about you from the first day, how smart you were, how you liked to build things with your hands, how you asked questions about everything. You know stories about my childhood? Bayo asked, thirsty for any memory of his father. Many. Ngozi smiled for the first time since they arrived. He carried your pictures in his wallet, showed them to anyone who would look. He talked about the day you assembled a remote control car all by yourself, about how you defended a smaller classmate at school, about your dreams of becoming an engineer. Every word from Ngozi was like a precious gift to Bayo. He had spent his entire life imagining his father had completely forgotten him, when in fact Dele carried his memories like treasures. And about me? Chioma asked shyly. Was he happy I was coming? Ngozi's eyes filled with tears. My dear, he was ecstatic. He chose your name, you know. He said you would be Chioma, because it means God is good, and that you would be our promise that something beautiful could emerge even from pain. Chioma covered her face with her hands, too emotional to speak. Discovering that her father had chosen her name, that he had rejoiced in her existence, healed a wound she never even knew she carried. Ngozi, Funmilayo said softly. Can I ask how his last days were? Ngozi hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He was planning to see you, Funmilayo. He wanted to talk, to explain that he never intended to destroy your family. Dele told me that you had married young, that you grew up together, that you were the first person who truly believed in him. The impact of these words on Funmilayo was devastating. I was the first person who believed in him, she whispered. And when he left me, I felt like everything we had built together was a lie. It wasn't a lie, Ngozi said firmly. Dele told me about your first years of marriage, how you supported him when he decided to start his own business, how you stood by him when everyone said he would fail. You were fundamental to the man he became. Funmilayo closed her eyes, long-buried memories rushing to the surface. We were so young, so full of dreams, and you achieved many of those dreams together. Ngozi continued. Dele never stopped talking about your business intelligence, your strength, your determination. Even when our relationship started, he always spoke of you with admiration. Then why did he leave me? Funmilayo asked, the old pain showing in her voice. Ngozi looked directly into the other woman's eyes. Because sometimes love is not enough to overcome the differences that arise when people grow in different directions. You married as teenagers and became adults with incompatible dreams. And you were compatible with his new dreams? Funmilayo asked without bitterness, only genuine curiosity. I was simple, Ngozi admitted. Dele said that with me he could just be a man, not a businessman, not a provider, not a public image. With me, he could plant flowers, cook dinner, dream of a life without pressure. Bayo watched the conversation between the two women with growing fascination. For the first time, he was seeing his father not as the man who had abandoned him, but as a complex human being with fears, dreams, and contradictions. Was he happy with you? Funmilayo asked. And Chioma held her breath. knowing how much courage that question required. Very happy, Ngozi answered honestly, but also very guilty. His happiness always came with the awareness of what he had left behind. He mentioned the accident. Bayo asked softly. Ngozi shook her head. It wasn't really an accident. Dele was driving to your house. Funmilayo. The shock on everyone's face was evident. To our house? Funmilayo asked in disbelief. He had decided to talk to you that night. He wanted to propose a way to share custody of Bayo, to find a way to keep everyone in his life. You as the mother of his son, me as the woman he loved, and the children as the top priority. Tears streamed freely down Funmilayo's face. He was coming home. After 2 years, he was finally coming home, and I encouraged him to go, Ngozi added. I told him Bayo needed his father, that you deserved an honest explanation, that our unborn daughter deserved to grow up knowing her brother. That's why the accident happened on that road, Bayo murmured, the pieces finally fitting together. He was coming back to us. Yes, Ngozi confirmed, and his last words in the hospital were about you all. He asked me to take care of Bayo if anything happened to Funmilayo, and he asked Funmilayo to take care of our daughter if anything happened to me. The silence that followed was sacred, filled with revelations that completely rewrote the narrative everyone had carried for decades. He loved all of us, Chioma said softly, and he died trying to bring us together. That's why, Ngozi said, looking directly at Funmilayo. When you threw me out that day, it wasn't just cruel, it was the destruction of everything Dele had dreamed for our family. Funmilayo slowly stood up and walked over to Ngozi, kneeling before the chair where the other woman sat. Ngozi Okoro, she said in a broken voice, I ask for your forgiveness, not just for what I did to you, but for destroying the dream of the man we both loved. Ngozi looked at the powerful woman kneeling before her, the same woman who had humiliated her decades earlier, and saw not an enemy, but another widow who had suffered the same devastating loss. Funmilayo Adebayo, Ngozi replied, gently placing her hands on the other woman's shoulders. I forgive you, and I ask you to forgive Dele for leaving us. Both women wept then, decades of pain, anger, and grief, finally finding release. Bayo and Chioma hugged each other, watching their mothers finally find the peace Dele had wished for all of them. And now? Chioma asked when the tears subsided. How do we move forward? Now, Funmilayo said, standing up and helping Ngozi to her feet as well. We fulfill the promise we couldn't keep when Dele was alive. We become the family he dreamed of. Weeks passed in a remarkable transformation. Ngozi was taken to the best doctors in the country, her health problems finally receiving the proper treatment she had deserved for years. The arthritis that had tormented her began to improve with modern medication, and specialized physiotherapy restored mobility to her worn-out knees. Chioma left her job at the Echo Crown, but not before ensuring that Mrs. Aduale was promoted to general manager and that all the staff received substantial raises. She began working at Adebayo Enterprises as the Director of Social Development, creating programs to help families in situations similar to the one she and Ngozi had faced. Bayo discovered in his sister not just a family member, but an exceptional business partner. Chioma's unique perspective, combined with her real-life experience, brought a human dimension to the family business that had been absent for decades. Funmilayo became the grandmother Chioma never had the chance to know, visiting them regularly, learning the simple recipes Dele had loved, listening to stories about the man they had both loved. On one special afternoon, the four of them gathered at the cemetery where Dele was buried. Funmilayo had a new headstone made, not grand or ostentatious, but beautiful and dignified, with flowers Ngozi knew he loved. We did it, Dele, Funmilayo whispered, placing white roses on the grave. We managed to become the family you dreamed of. Ngozi placed her hand on Funmilayo's. He would be proud of all of us. Bayo and Chioma stood on either side of their mothers, a family finally united by love instead of divided by pain. Papa. Chioma spoke for the first time to the grave of the man she never knew. Thank you for giving us each other. Thank you for choosing my name. And thank you for dreaming of this family, even when it seemed impossible. I love you, Dad, Bayo added, and I promise to take care of all of them as you would have. When they left the cemetery that day, they were no longer four people separated by the tragedy of the past. They were a complicated, non-traditional family, marked by pain, but strengthened by forgiveness, and united by the love that Dele Adebayo had planted in each of their hearts. The waitress who had served table 16 that night had transformed not only her own life, but had fulfilled the last wish of a father who died, trying to unite those he loved most. And at the Echo Crown, table 16 was now reserved once a month for family dinners. 4 people Dele had loved, finally gathered around the same table, sharing not just a meal, but a second chance to be the family he always dreamed they would be.